I want to give you some examples to give you a sense of the range of outcomes that are possible here, because career satisfaction doesn't always mean the same thing for everyone. So on one end of the spectrum, we have the dramatic pivot, right? Like, I worked with this client who had spent years in the film and TV world. He was successful by a lot of external measures, but he was increasingly feeling burnt out and non-fulfilled. And through the process, we uncovered things that he really enjoyed. Like, he enjoyed being hands-on. He enjoyed tangible problems. He liked helping people. And the part of production that he loved was the on-set problem solving, right? Not the politics, not the long hours, and not really the industry himself or itself. And so when we came to the second phase of brainstorming and setting a destination, we came up with a whole bunch of possibilities. Most of them were silly and a bit impractical, but one that kept coming up was physical therapy. So at first, we set that aside because it would be too far, too big a jump, right? It would require going back to school. So we started by exploring closer options to home, things that are adjacent to his current world. Turns out those were too close. And they wouldn't actually solve the problem that he wanted to solve. So we came back to physical therapy, and he gave it a more serious look. And it turns out he liked what he saw. And so now, today, he is in school to be a physical therapist and enjoying the process, because that is work and that is a way of being that fits him in a way that his previous career never did. On the other end of the spectrum, we have something that's much more like an internal transformation. So another one of my clients is a senior leader at a tech startup. And when I first started working with him, he was drowning. Like 80+ hour work weeks, scope that had just ballooned way beyond what he'd signed for. And he was just constantly fighting fires day in and day out. And through the process, especially in the first phase, we got really clear on what he actually wanted. Like, he wanted the parts of his roles that he found meaningful, and he needed boundaries, right? He needed and he also needed resources from the company that would make the job more sustainable, right? Like more headcount, more resources to tackle the problem. And then he did something that sounds simple, but actually isn't, right? He started consistently advocating for those things to a largely receptive management team. And over the course of 9 months, this client completely transformed his role without having to change companies. Like, he went from 80+ hours down to 45 hours per week. He renegotiated his scope to focus only on what he wanted to work on, and he successfully advocated for adding more headcount to handle the workload that was being thrown his way. And along the way, he increased his compensation by 30% and also got himself a really significant equity grant. So, same company, same title, completely different experience. Now, I know that these two stories are on the extreme end of the spectrums, both of them. And so you and your journey, you're probably going to land somewhere in the middle. And I tell these two stories because not only because they represent two very different cases that look different on the surface, but also for what they share in common, right? There's one common thread that ties these two together, and that is how they feel, how they felt to the people in them. Both of these clients moved from a version of success that looked good on paper but felt empty, right? And they moved to something that actually fit who they were. Something that gave them a greater sense of fulfillment, a greater sense of satisfaction. And that's what we're optimizing for, right? The how we get there is highly contextually dependent, right? It depends on how far you need to go in order to make it happen, and how receptive, of course, your current environment is to what you need.